The story I'm telling today is about the ability to give things up. It's when the Bodhisattva, the Buddha in one of his earlier lives, decides to cultivate nekama, and this means renunciation. So it means partly to go and become a monastic and practice meditation that way, but it's also a word used to apply to meditation itself. Because when we sit and meditate, we give some things up to find others. So nekama is necessary for us to be able to give up the preoccupations we have during the day and be able to sit in meditation and find something else there. Now, in this story, the Bodhisattva is reborn as a gardener. And he's very, very poor, but he just loves his garden and all the different kinds of vegetables there. So he grows herbs, pumpkins, gourds, vegetables, all kinds of things. And he has one possession and one possession only, and that's his favourite little spade. And he loves it. He uses it all the time. One day he decides he'd like to practice meditation and become a monk. So he buries his lovely little spade and decides to take holy orders. But once he's gone, he feels a kind of nostalgia for this lovely spade. He really wants to go and find it again and start his digging. And so in the end he can't bear it anymore, and he goes back to his garden, digs up the spade and starts gardening again. Now, again the thought comes up to him he'd like to practice meditation, and again he goes off and becomes a monk. And again he returns, all because of one little spade. He just missed it so much. This happens 6 times. In the end, he goes back to his garden after the 6th time and thinks, right, this time I'm really going to manage it. So he goes to the banks of the river, turns his back on the river, and whirls the spade 3 times around his head, just throwing it right in the middle of the stream. Then he knows he'll never be able to find the spade again, and so he has to give it up. He's so pleased he's managed to give this spade up after all this time that he gives a great shout of victory. "I've conquered it! I've conquered it! I'm a victor!" Now, as he shouted this out, the king of Benares was riding by on an elephant and was by the river because he'd been bathing. He hears the words, "I've conquered it, I've conquered it," and he thinks, I must find out about this person who's conquered something. I wonder what he's conquered. Now, this king had just come back from the borders where he'd quelled a disturbance there. So he felt he was quite a conqueror himself and wanted to meet another one. So he had the man summoned to him and said, "My good man, what is it you've conquered? You're obviously very pleased to be a victor. Please tell me about it." "I'm a bit of a conqueror myself. I've just quelled a disturbance around the borders of my country. So I'd like to hear from another conqueror what he's done and how he's done it." The Bodhisattva said, "I'm afraid my victory is 1,000, no, 100,000 times better than yours, because I've conquered myself. I had great cravings, and it took me a long time, but now at last I'm free. They've gone." And the king was very deeply impressed with this. And he said, "Tell me more about this victory." So the Bodhisattva looks at the water and he looks at the river, and because he's practiced some meditation, he attains a state known as jhana, which is a very deep and happy state where the mind can do wonderful things, and the body too. And after he's finished that, he flies in the air because he has a miraculous power from this jhana, and stands above the king and says, "The victory that needs another victory, and yet another victory, and another, is really a loss. But the victory over oneself, that's the real victory, and you will always be the winner then." The king was very deeply impressed by this, and he says, "Where are you going now? I really like what you say." And Bodhisattva, the gardener, says, "Well, I've decided now to just go and practice meditation. It's what I really want to do. I'm going to become a recluse in the Himalayas." So the king says, "Well, do you know, I think I'd like to join you. I want to do this too." And he decides to go with him. And then, when his armies hear all about this, they think, I'd quite like to do that too. A lot nicer than fighting and things like that. And so they all get ready to go off to the Himalayas. Now, news gets to Benares that the Spade Sage, as he's called, has converted the king, and that he won't be coming back, and that he wants to go off and meditate in some leaf huts in the Himalayas. So the whole of Benares think, well, wouldn't that be quite a nice thing to do too? So they all leave Benares and start on their way to the Himalayas. So it's quite a big procession this time. Now, in the heavens above, King Shaka, who's a very kindly god who likes to look over things happening in the human realm, he sees what's going on and he thinks, we have a real logistics problem here. All these people are going to need somewhere to live, and it's just going to be awful if they don't find accommodation, somewhere to stay, and food. So he has this divine architect called Vishwakarma, and he says to him, "Vishwakarma, could you just go down to the Himalayas, find a lovely spot for them, and just build lots and lots of leaf huts for them?" Vishwakarma says, "Yes, I'll do that." So he whizzes down to the Himalayas, builds lots of leaf huts, shoos away all the animals to the outskirts so that they're looked after but not actually in the enclave, and the Bodhisattva and all his companions and retinue arrive. And when they arrive at this beautiful spot, they realise this is where they must stay, because it has lots of nice leaf huts and places to drink and plenty of food. So the Bodhisattva arranges everybody to have accommodation, everybody has somewhere to stay, and they all decide they're going to give up all kinds of sense of hierarchy, authority, being in charge of anything, and they're just going to live in amity, in friendship, in the Himalayas, and in due order. Then the Bodhisattva, the gardener that was, says, "Right, I'm now a recluse." And what he does then is to practice all the meditations he'd wanted to before. So he does colours meditation. He meditates on red, blue, gold, silver. He practices meditation on the elements, earth, water, fire and air. And then he practices the divine abidings. And these are very high meditations because it's the practices of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy and equanimity. And his mind becomes very flexible and powerful, and he can do all kinds of things. He has real mastery over his own mind. And when he's done that, he says to the others, "Right, I can teach you all now how to practice these meditations." And he spends the rest of his life very happily teaching them to them. And when they all die, those who've been practicing meditation get reborn in the heaven for people who've been meditating and are very happy there. And all the people who've been caring for them, who didn't feel like meditating, but liked helping people and looking after them and keeping things going and keeping everybody happy, they were reborn in the heaven too. And so that's the end of the story. I like it because it's not very easy to give things up. And when one sits, say, perhaps in a meditation practice, there are lots of things, a bit like the spade, that we're rather attracted to and would like to do. But if you can give it up just for the time you're meditating or for the time you're sitting quietly, then there's a kind of pleasure in that too. So, I hope you enjoyed the story of renunciation, and this is the third perfection of the Bodhisattva as he prepares to become a Buddha in his final life.